Restituto.
Comes up in the pocket. Fires to the right side. Caught by Diggs. Stay up. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Touchdown. Are you kidding me? It's the Minneapolis Miracle.
I got 3 words for you. You like that?
Welcome to the Rest Stop. It's June 22nd, 2021. I'm Brad Restituto, Spencer Ostrowski. Follow me on Twitter at Brad the Believer. We've got to get right into this as we're witnessing one of the most improbable playoff finishes that I've seen. I know it's very hyperbolic to say in NBA history, but this is absolutely incredible. I'm a little behind watching the live feed. I'm seeing still 0.7 seconds on the clock, but the Phoenix Suns seem to be snatching victory from the hands of defeat as they blew a 7-point fourth quarter lead. The Clippers came back, took the lead late in the fourth quarter. Paul George had a chance to make it a 3-point Clippers lead with under 5 seconds from the free throw line. Paul George bricked 2 free throws. There was about 5 seconds left on the clock. Corner 3 from the Suns missed, tapped out of bounds with 0.9 seconds left. And Phoenix, they had to review the play to see if Phoenix obtained possession. And I know I'm a little behind, but we're following this live with 0.7 just to have the exclamation point if Phoenix can close this game out. In Phoenix, looking to take a 2-0 series lead, a really pivotal moment because if Phoenix gave up this game and then going back to Staples Center 1-1, it would be really demoralizing blowing that lead with a big opportunity at a 2-0 lead. They've got to go full court, the Clippers here. It should be over, but really unbelievable. Unbelievable finish to this basketball game as Paul George, like I said, missed 2 crucial free throws. It made it it was a 103-102 game. Phoenix missed a corner 3, but the out of bounds, the tipped rebound was in Phoenix's possession. As they were reviewing the possession with 0.9 seconds left, it gave Monty Williams and the Suns an opportunity to drop a play out of bounds. And so the substitution with the 0.9 seconds, the Clippers brought in DeMarcus Cousins to defend the inbound pass. Jay Crowder from behind the basket was inbounding the basketball with 0.9 seconds. DeMarcus Cousins guarding the inbound. Devin Booker set a back screen on Ivana Subats. DeAndre Ayton, who's had a fantastic game, came briefly around the screen. Jay Crowder threw a perfect pass directly to the rim. Ayton went up, dunked the basketball in a perfect pass, and with under a second left to give the Suns a 104-103 lead. And they're still trying to figure out these 0.7 seconds, but it seems as if in most improbable of fashion, with the Phoenix Suns missing a corner 3, with under 3 seconds left and then under 1 second left, Monty Williams has a chance to, with no timeouts, draw up an inbound play because they're reviewing the possession with 0.9 seconds left. Jay Crowder with DeMarcus Cousins guarding the inbound throws a near perfect from behind the basket pass right in front of the hoop. Ayton goes up over Zubats, dunks it in. And as I'm watching it a little behind, full court pass, and that's it. That's the game. The Phoenix Suns, Spencer the Wiz, and one of the most insane finishes I've seen in playoff basketball history. They snatch victory from the hands of defeat as they gave this game away pretty much to the Clippers and thought it was over and we were going to go back to Staples Center 1 game apiece. That was not the case as Monty Williams and the Phoenix Suns executed perfectly with 0.9 seconds left. Jay Crowder could not have thrown a better pass. Spence Ayton goes up, and he's had a fantastic playoff series, an amazing game too. Dunks the basketball, and the Suns now, with all the momentum and possibly Chris Paul coming back for Game 3, take a 2-0 series lead in one of the most improbable playoff finishes I've ever seen, Spence.
Yeah, and the big story of the game, or at least I believe the big story of the game that will be talked about immediately tomorrow, and all the big ones, the first takes, I can't even think of any of these morning shows anymore, but is Playoff P. I mean, he had the whole moniker. He's shooting like 9 for 22, I think, going into the last minute. He had a very big clutch shot, right, to put him up. And then, the game looks over. I mean, there's a pretty strange out of bounds play where Patrick Beverley, tips the ball out of Devin Booker's hands, but Booker had it in his hand technically last, even though he wasn't the one who tipped it out of bounds. And, Paul George, he gets to go to the free throw line. The whole narrative of him is going to change. Even though he didn't shoot very well, he makes those 2 free throws. They win that game. Everyone talks about, the difference that Paul George is making and how good he's been. But now he misses 2 free throws. Looks like he's going to get bailed out with Mikal Bridges missing that corner 3. And, we saw what just happened at the end of that game. Paul George is going to get crucified tomorrow, guaranteed, and there's no 2 ways about it.
Spence, what a turning point. I mean, this is really, really huge confidence for the Clippers. They're probably, in my opinion, without Kawhi Leonard for the rest of this playoff series. But to go back to Staples Center, 1 game apiece, was really huge to do that in comeback fashion for their confidence. And again, down 7 late in the fourth quarter, Paul George made some good plays. Patrick Beverley, great defense. And they had an opportunity to go up 3 with under 5 seconds and really put the pressure on the Suns and would have equated a victory if he knocked down those 2 free throws. Instead, Spence, he misses both and gives the Suns an opportunity with any basket to win the game. They have the wide open corner 3, as I mentioned. And then just to run you through it one more time, the inbounds after Mikal Bridges misses the 3 with under 3 seconds left, they had to review off of the rebound. The ball was tipped out of bounds. They had to review possession. Under that review, the Suns had a chance to huddle up. Monty Williams drew up a play, so 0.9 seconds left. Jay Crowder behind their own basket with DeMarcus Cousins subbing in, guarding the inbound. Crowder makes a perfect pass to DeAndre Ayton, who comes around a Devin Booker back screen on Ivica Zubac right above the rim. All Ayton has to do is rise above and pretty much tap it in, but he dunks it in, and it only took 0.2 seconds off the clock. And as the commentator said on ESPN, Van Gundy and Mark Jackson, there's no goaltending on an inbounds pass. The bucket counts. No more timeouts for the Clippers. They only have 0.777 seconds left on the clock to go full court. They don't even get a shot up. And now, with all of that momentum and possibly Chris Paul back healthy for Game 3, the Phoenix Suns go up 2-0 in the Western Conference Finals in one of the more improbable finishes in playoff basketball in recent memory. Absolutely incredible, as it looked as the Suns gave away this basketball game, allowing the Clippers to come back from 7 points down with under 3 minutes left. And fortunate for the Phoenix Suns that Paul George missed 2 huge free throws after playing not his best game in Game 2, but getting contributions from Patrick Beverley, from Reggie Jackson, Luke Kennard, a really big fourth quarter, hitting some big shots, scoring in double digits. But the Suns find a way. And Spence, man, this is just really, really big, because if we've talked about having an opportunity up 2-0 to go up 3-0 and really close the door. A couple teams missed those opportunities. The Brooklyn Nets were up 2-0. They had an opportunity to shut the door in Game 3 and take a commanding lead. They did not. They lost the series. The Dallas Mavericks were up 2-0 on these same Clippers. They lost the series, as well as the Utah Jazz were up 2-0 on the Clippers and then lost 4 straight to the Clippers. I don't think that's going to be the case in this series, especially with no Kawhi Leonard and Chris Paul more likely than not coming back to this lineup in Game 3. And the demoralizing way you lose this Game 2, literally snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, the Clippers missing those free throws and then allowing a perfectly executed play with under 1 second left. And the Phoenix Suns have a 2-0 lead in the Western Conference Finals with an opportunity with 2 more victories to represent the West in the NBA Finals.
Yeah, well, one of the bigger takeaways from the game, there's a couple, obviously there's a lot that went on, but you're never going to get a game as bad as this from Devin Booker, or at least you wouldn't expect that to happen. Shot 5 of 16 in the contest, and he honestly just wasn't very good. I think he had like 6 turnovers, made a lot of risky passes. I think that could have easily been 8 turnovers, although I guess probably that out of bounds. Yeah, so he had 7 turnovers. I predict he could have had at least 10. A lot of guys made some really tough catches. So and now that Chris Paul is likely going to come back for Game 3, or at least that's what it seems like, he's just not going to have those kinds of responsibilities. I mean, one of the main reasons why they haven't made it so far, like in the playoffs at this point, was because of his inability to do that. And that's not his fault, right? Like, he's just not the kind of player he is. To expect someone to be able to change the way they play the game so drastically is tough. But even with all of that, they won the basketball game, and that's a huge problem for the Clippers, who will likely be without, Kawhi Leonard, like you said, for the rest of these playoffs. The other bigger note I would say through this game that really stood out to me is the officiating to a certain point, but really just a lack of good rules like for the NBA. So much of it, like it all seemed to have accumulated in the last 2 minutes of this game. Constant stopping, constant timeouts, and even that review of the last play of the game, it was an extra timeout for the Phoenix Suns. And if I'm the Clippers, I say, don't go to review it. Like, I don't, it's not a voluntary thing, but I think if their body language was correct, where you call it the Suns are like, okay, I mean, that's it. I don't care. It's Suns ball like that. They're not going to be able to make a play. I mean, they may have one in their mind, but certainly the 1 minute or however long that review period was allowed them to draw up a beautifully executed play. Not that was the first time they'd ever done it, but again, I don't think that's something you can come up with on the fly. Also, that Devin Booker offensive foul was peculiar to me, where, I mean, nothing happened and they stopped the game to review it. Something like they have to call a foul or something in order to stop the game. It's like they just completely lost control, and they were so eager to go to the review center. It's like, I wish there would be a maximum of one timeout for each team in the final 2 minutes of the game, and maybe like one booth review, something like that. But it's just so crazy that the last 2 minutes of any basketball game nowadays is taking at least 15 minutes. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Spence, if the Suns go on to win this series, this will, of course, be talked about as the turning point in this series. Incredible finish. Spence, real quick, how would you rate this playoff finish and of what you've just witnessed in your lifetime as being a basketball fan? I know it's how would you rate this finish? Like, as far as last second improbable finishes that you've seen, I know it's fresh on your mind, but have you seen? I can't recall seeing anything like this in recent memory.
I think a lot of it has been elevated personally because, like, this is the first time we have crowds. Look, that's an improbable finish as any that we'll ever see. But I don't know. It didn't feel all that special to me. I guess really the main reason is because it's only game 2, so technically the series is not over. You want to look specifically at the Clippers. They've done this twice now. Again, it's going to be high up on a lot of people's list, but I'm going to wait and see like what happens in the series. And a lot of these great moments, I think you kind of like Kevin Durant. Like, who knows how often we'll talk about one of the greatest triple doubles like in NBA history, certainly in the playoffs, and that might be swept under the rug simply because they lost that series. Because that's the first thing people will say. Oh, you remember Kevin Durant's triple double? Oh yeah, well they lost that series. Not that they say that. I don't think the Phoenix Suns will maybe even sweep this series. We know, who knows? Like, how tired the Clippers are, especially now finding themselves in another hole. I can say the most recent one that I would say was on top of this is Kawhi Leonard's kind of rolling shot against the 76ers. That is something that will forever be kind of implanted in my mind.
Yeah, the Kawhi Leonard shot was huge, but with having under a second left, the improbability of this one certainly ranks up there with me. And yeah, it'll be a little lost if somehow the Phoenix Suns lose this series. But if they win, to me, this is the turning point. I expect them to win this series. We'll see. Clippers are very resilient. But like you said, a basketball team that's expended a lot of energy coming back from 2-0 in 2 straight series and not having arguably their best player in Kawhi Leonard is going to be an uphill battle to beat a rested Suns team that's gone up 2 games without Chris Paul, and now having him back have a real serious opportunity as Chris Paul will be facing his old team at Staples Center. If he's back for game 3, you certainly know he'll be motivated to appear in his first NBA Finals. And I think if the Suns go up 3-0, I do not see the Clippers winning 4 games in a row against the Suns, and I think the door will be shut. I think game 3 is going to be huge. I think this was huge because having a split for the Clippers would be a huge momentum boost, and the way that they lost this game was so improbable. I think it's really going to give a lot of confidence and a little bit demoralizing for the Clippers. So just a fantastic finish to tonight's single game in the NBA playoffs, the Western Conference Finals. The Phoenix Suns go up 2-0 on the LA Clippers with a 104-103 victory. And DeAndre Ayton, to me, was the player of the game for the Suns. He was fantastic, 12 of 15 from the field, 24 points, 14 rebounds, 1 steal, 1 block. A really fantastic effort. This guy, before our eyes, has gotten better and better with each playoff game. Congratulations to the Suns, and we'll see how this series plays out. This is not unfamiliar territory for the LA Clippers, as they've been down 2-0 now in multiple series. So we'll see if they're able to fight out of this hole. Spence, we had to start off with that because, of course, just improbable fashion, but I do have a personal announcement to make. As yesterday, I became an engaged man. I am now engaged.
Oh, wow. I didn't know. This is news to me, too.
This is news. I was a guest host on SportsX Radio last night and announced it, but, of course, here officially on the podcast, my now fiance, Amanda, will be the future Amanda Restituto. So I'm happy and proud to announce that. We are very elated for that, as this is our 3-year anniversary week. So I figured what better way to start off the anniversary week than a proposal. So it's very exciting for both of us. So I thought I would announce that here on the podcast. And of course, news to you, Spencer the Wiz. And but all of our families are very happy and excited. So that is some cool news. And you've met Amanda, so
what's the breakdown? I mean, you had to propose and everything. What's the
I'll give you the story. So it was, of course, it was very nerve-wracking for me, as there's a lot of stuff going on. And I wanted to do it this week. So I had some things in mind, but there was a ring that she has. It's a Beauty and the Beast bell ring. It's rose gold that was getting repaired at Zales jewelry store. Well, she was supposed to have it back over the weekend, but when she got it back, it didn't have the engraving that I initially had on it when I got it for her. So they kept it an extra day. So I figured the timing would be good. I went into Zales with some flowers, and we were expected to pick up the ring later. She was with her sister in Henderson that I was going to pick her up, and we were going to go pick up the ring. Well, I stopped into Zales ahead of time, and I said, I want to propose, and I want you to bring out her ring that she's expecting to get back being fixed with an empty box. And when she sees it's empty, I'm going to go behind her. I'm going to have the engagement ring, and I'm going to get on a knee and propose. So that's what happened. I'm usually not a nervous person, Spence, and I wasn't until the moment happened where she opened the box and there was nothing in there. And I knew that was my cue to start the proposal. So I started sweating profusely, got on one knee, and not sure exactly what I said. But at some point I asked her to marry me. She was such in complete shock, had no idea what was happening, was a complete surprise. But she said yes, and that was kind of the execution. I had one of the workers film it. They didn't do a great job. I definitely should have hired you, Spence, to come out and film this, because their filming job was they were very nice. They did a great job, but I give their filming skills a D. But we do have footage of it. She said yes. I gave her the flowers, and that is the story. So as of yesterday, in our 3-year anniversary will be coming up Saturday. This is now our anniversary and engagement week. So we're both very excited. And you can see there in the chat, she has jumped in saying we're engaged. So she's very thrilled. I'm thrilled. It's all still surreal. I don't know that it's sunk in yet, but it is quite exciting for both of us. So that's that news on a personal note, Spence, but we'll get back to the sports. As we do have a lot of basketball to cover. And I know we didn't talk about this in our email rundown, but of course it did happen today, the NBA draft lottery. So we could get to that at some point if you care to discuss, Spence. But other sports and playoff news, especially important here locally, the NHL playoffs in the Western Conference Finals, the Golden Knights and the Montreal Canadiens are tied at 2 games apiece. A pivotal Game 5 tonight at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, also known as the Fortress. The Golden Knights were shocked and stunned tonight as they were completely dominated by the Montreal Canadiens. It's a 4-1 final tonight. The Canadiens take a commanding 3-2 series lead. The Vegas Golden Knights a huge favorite in the series, Spence. And now the Canadiens 1 victory away, going back to Montreal to now representing the Western Conference in the Stanley Cup Finals. Heartbreaking loss tonight for the Knights, Spence. You wouldn't have anticipated it at home, but it happened. after a big overtime win to tie up the series at 2. The Canadiens control the game tonight, and they win by a score of 4-1.
Yeah, it is disappointing, like from a fan perspective, but it's not disappointing. I mean, when you look at the team, if you don't get production out of, your forwards, the guys who are supposed to score, then you're not going to win a series. It's like they have no one to blame but themselves, which I think every team who loses could say that, but it feels tenfold for them. Like, where is Mark Stone? Kucherov for Tampa Bay Lightning has scored in every single game for them so far in their series. They haven't won every game, but their best player has been involved, at least gotten them close to winning these games. And it goes much farther than, Mark Stone. Pacioretty scored a garbage time goal and they're down 3. So it's like, I don't know what they're waiting for necessarily. I don't know what the deal is, but this team has always had this problem where they just lack the guy who steps up when they need him the most. I mean, look at Devin Booker tonight, who hit that big shot at the elbow. Certainly not playoff P, but you can even look down to like Giannis maybe or Drew Holiday when he hit those big shots. Like, no one on the team is willing to do that, and that is what has prohibited them, from making the Stanley Cup so far. And hopefully they can get it together. The series is certainly not over. They're the better team, I think, by far. So I know that they can get there. The real issue will end up being, the whole goaltender situation where you bring in Robin Leonard and he is stellar in Game 4, absolutely deadly. Had one goal go past him. It was a one-on-one kind of penalty shot situation. He actually faced 2 of those in the game. He saved the second one. And after that, man, he was lights out. So, and then now you have Fleury, who's like, starting to put in some goals in. I don't know if it's the Canadiens have figured him out. I don't know if it's fatigue for him, but I think the Knights definitely should be talking about Leonard. It's pretty easy, but they can rally behind. The good thing is about a 7-game series, and especially when you have obviously home ice advantages, you do get that Game 7 at home. It wasn't perfect for them tonight, but they can get it done. We'll see if they can survive in Canada, and then anything can happen in Vegas for Game 7.
Yeah, Spence backs against the wall for the Golden Knights. This is the Rest Stop. That's Spencer Ostrowski. Follow him on Twitter at Spencer the Wiz. I'm Brad Restituto at Brad the Believer. We do have a nice show for tonight as we finish up our basketball talk. We've got some NFL news to get to that we will later in the podcast, of course, coming out of Las Vegas with the Raiders. The Karl Nassib news that has come out, we'll talk about that. Also, some unfortunate news for the Super Bowl representative this past season in the AFC Conference, the Kansas City Chiefs, defensive lineman Frank Clark. He's in the news in a negative way. We'll talk about that unfortunate situation and really kind of knuckleheaded situation as we'll discuss his possible felony gun possession charges. But Spence, let's keep it in the NBA and let's talk about, we talked about the Suns tonight going up 2-0. The games that happened over the weekend in the Eastern Conference that will set up tomorrow's Game 1 matchup between the Milwaukee Bucks and the Atlanta Hawks, Spence. And this started on Saturday with the Milwaukee Bucks going into Brooklyn in overtime, defeating the Nets 115-111. Kevin Durant's 48 points were not enough. And I talked about the turning point in that series being in Game 3. A lot of people can dissect and decipher the Kyrie injury and everything of that sort. Spence, you thought it was over with Kevin Durant's Game 5. Incredible performance, taking a 3-2 series lead. I caution that this series was not over, and it certainly was not, as the Bucks won 2 straight in Game 6 and Game 7, and they're now moving on to the Eastern Conference Finals in a very disappointing outcome for Steve Nash, Kevin Durant, James Harden, and the Brooklyn Nets proverbial super team are now going home, and they're going to have to wait another year as Mike Budenholzer hoping to save his job, Giannis trying to get the monkey off his back, and the Bucks advance with a 115-111 victory. They will now be representing the East in the Eastern Conference Finals, taking on the Atlanta Hawks, and the Bucks will be quite the favorite in this series. Over 3.5-1 underdogs are Atlanta in this series. What are your thoughts on the Bucks advancing with 2 victories, Spence? And then how do they match up in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Hawks?
Yeah, I was surprised, obviously. Like I said, I thought they were done. Didn't think Giannis kind of had that attitude necessary to elevate them through a Game 7, especially away. But he had an incredible game. That overtime was just 2 teams that were so exhausted and so tired. Both teams playing their starters to the maximum. I think Giannis in that game had to come out for like a quick moment just because he literally was so tired. And I believe that, obviously. I don't think I think he also gives his entire heart. And that's never been the issue for him, obviously. Like, I don't think it's a lack of trying. I think a lot of it is a lack of skill, maybe some bad, ball decisions. But man, he had some big buckets back in that game, but it could have easily have been the Brooklyn Nets in the conference finals that we're talking about now, with Kevin Durant's turnaround jumper to send it into overtime, literally inches away from them winning that game. Now there was like 0.8 seconds, but still, I would say it would be really tough. And I don't really think, the Bucks have a guy who can make a shot like that. Like, you would want Kevin Durant to take that shot like he did at the end of that game. But hey, they got it done, so all the credit to them. Drew Holiday was like horrible in that game, but he did have that, defining kind of defense against Kevin Durant. I think they have a great chance to beat Atlanta going on to the next round. Like, everybody keeps saying that everybody has a great chance against Atlanta, and then they keep, defying those expectations. So I don't think Atlanta has a 0% probability. I think Milwaukee was one of the worst 3-point defending teams in the league, and that's an area where the Atlanta Hawks shine. So I think they'll certainly have their shot. The only thing you worry about is, Giannis, with every team, of course. But, I don't think that Clint Capella can play full time on Giannis, especially if they do plan on doing that just for like size reasons. Then obviously you'd like to see Giannis on the perimeter, moving in, just because Clint Capella can't move fast enough because of he's an actual center. Most people cannot move like Giannis. And other than that, as I'm looking down, the Atlanta Hawks roster, I'm not sure anyone else kind of has that size or capability, because Kevin Huerter will be guarding Chris Middleton for sure. And Chris Middleton actually didn't have a great regular season against Atlanta. I think he averaged 17.5 points against them. So once again, it will be on Giannis's shoulders. And I mean, this is a defining moment in his career once again, because look, a big stepping stone for him was, first of all, getting past the Heat, and now supposedly the best team in the league, although they were missing their best player, and also the second best player was hobbled. So you can kind of say it's up in the air. I mean, they were never amazing in that series, and it feels like they should have been a lot better, in my opinion.
Yeah, Spence. Look, you know how high I am on the Atlanta Hawks, and the Milwaukee Bucks. Even though they won this series against Brooklyn, to me, from top to bottom, it was a struggle for most of the series for them to score the basketball. They have not been efficient from three the entire playoffs, or at least this entire series against the Nets. I think there's a certain swagger and juice about the Atlanta Hawks, and I think they have had high contributions from many guys. We talked about Kevin Huerter. He's not only been great offensively, he's been a stud on defense. Trae Young, when he's not efficient shooting the basketball, he's been very good passing the basketball and penetrating to the basket. I think John Collins, even though he can't match up size-wise with Giannis, for whatever reason, he's been able to have his hands on so many rebounds where you wouldn't expect. His energy level and effort level is unmatched, I believe, for the Milwaukee team. I think Atlanta has such a confidence going into this series, and I think they can score easier than the Milwaukee Bucks from the perimeter. We'll see about that, because Giannis should be able to have his way. We know Nate McMillan is a smart basketball coach, and he will foul Giannis if it's a close game, which I think is a smart philosophy. We'll see if Giannis can stay disciplined in his shot selection. Chris Middleton has not been great. I think that the Brooklyn Nets lost the series more than Milwaukee won it, with Joe Harris the final 3 or 4 games of this series just not being able to hit a shot. Steve Nash with some questionable decisions. Mike James barely playing and really putting the load almost solely on Kevin Durant. He was exhausted. You talk about the exhaustion of the Milwaukee Bucks. This was a very exhausting series, and you could say the same thing for the Atlanta Hawks going 7. It just doesn't seem that way with Atlanta, though. Spence, they came back from 20-plus points. This is a young, hungry team. They're much younger than the Milwaukee Bucks, in my opinion, Spence, and I think that they've got tons of talent. And I think they are, even though they're 3.5-1 dogs, I think game 1 will be pretty big, but I think just an opportunity to split in Milwaukee in the first 2 games would be really big for Atlanta. They've been great since the All-Star break at home, even though against the Sixers took a couple games in Atlanta, but Atlanta came right back and won on Philadelphia's home court. And you can talk about Philadelphia's size is similar to Milwaukee's as far as having to deal with Embiid and Simmons. So I think it was a very good battle testing series against Philadelphia, and for them to come on top. And Trae Young was not great offensively in Game 7, and they still won. Collins, amazing. Herter, amazing. Of course, you don't know about Bogdanovic's health. Will Cam Reddish make an appearance in this series? I'm hearing that he possibly could be healthy, but we don't know exactly if he will break the lineup in this series against Milwaukee. But I expect a really exciting series, and I think Atlanta certainly has a swagger. And like I said, I thought it was very tough for Milwaukee to find scoring. Drew Holiday was huge in that Game 7 and down the stretch, but not consistent throughout the series. And like I said, as well as Middleton not being consistent shooting the basketball. And they're going to need these guys to be on their A game. And I just really love Atlanta's confidence and momentum. And I think we're in store for an exciting series in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, no doubt. I agree with you there. And it really is. Like, I think we all need to appreciate what Atlanta is doing this offseason or this postseason, and also what Nate McMillan has been able to accomplish. A guy who, when he was fired from the Pacers, I remember their statement kind of included his playoff record with them. So there's a lot of reasons for him to start doubting himself, but never once for a moment did he. When they fired Lloyd Pierce, the Atlanta Hawks, and they took him on, they didn't even hire him to like a deal. Like, he was it was a tryout deal for that time. So another reason for him to not have a lot of confidence in himself. And yet, look at what he's done with this team, the confidence he's instilled in his players, saying that anybody can make it happen and getting the most out of all of his guys, regardless of these injury situations. They've been without Cam Reddish. They've been without DeAndre Hunter, who's now out for the season. So it's just next man up for them. And that's the kind of mentality that you like to see. And also, when Trae Young has a bad game, the fact that a young team can step up for someone with how bad he played and it was horrible, there's no reason they can't go to the finals. I mean, imagine an Atlanta Hawks Phoenix Suns finals. That would just be entertainment, incarnate, basically.
Completely agree. Spence, we'll keep it in the NBA and talk about the draft lottery tonight. The Detroit Pistons, they get the first overall pick. It'll be the first time they have the first overall pick since, I believe, 1970 when they drafted Bob Lanier. Exciting night for the Pistons, as they were one of the worst teams record-wise, but we talked about it throughout the season. They were quite competitive for most of the season. A lot of the talks are Cade Cunningham from Oklahoma State being the first overall pick. I haven't seen a ton of Cunningham. I did watch him during the NCAA tournament and was not impressed at all. So just based on that, I'm giving not the greatest educated decision, but I'm not just in what I saw, I'm not expecting this guy to come out and do anything close to what some of the picks have done in the last couple years. So I could be dead wrong, but I'm not impressed in the short time that I've watched Cunningham. I'll watch a little bit more and maybe come up with a more educated evaluation. But in the biggest time in the NCAA tournament, he showed me nothing. Inconsistency shooting. And with his size, it's not like this guy is 6'7", 6'8", coming in with an NBA elite body to come in and dominate scoring the basketball. So, look, to me, you've got a lot of gritty guys on this Pistons team. We'll see if Cunningham's the first pick. I know Evan Mobley's in the discussion, the big guy from USC. I am a little more impressed with him. I like his length and his athleticism and his ability to handle and shoot the basketball. But we know this league is becoming a guard and wing league with guys that can really shoot the basketball. We're seeing that, of course, with Phoenix, with Atlanta. So it's going to be really important. Spence, the Pistons, the number 1 overall pick. What are your thoughts just briefly on maybe the top 5 guys in your brief evaluations of some of the guys coming out in this upcoming draft for the NBA?
Yeah, I do think the Pistons will take Cunningham first overall. It just feels it's the flashiest pick for sure, like taking a center first overall, although DeAndre Ayton may throw a wrench in that with his performance today. I still think, teams love those wing scorers. And a buddy of mine today, if you want to see the extreme on the other side of it, I was talking to him and he said that he is Jason Tatum with a better passing ability. So a little bit of a differing opinion. I'm not sure if I'd go that far, but I am impressed with his passing ability for his size. I think he'll be really good. we'll see what the Pistons can get out of their pick last year. I can't think of his name. He was from France, but he was just not good. I didn't like him in the draft process, but he's young, so it's not like he can't improve. Had a pretty nasty injury. Honestly, in my opinion, I think that guy has a chance to just like fizzle out in the NBA. Considering his injury, considering he hasn't been able to use his left hand so far in his career, those are not two good things formula-wise for having a long, illustrious career. But I do like Sadiq Bey, so I kind of feel like they made up for it. A guy who I was a big fan of coming out of Villanova, and he did have a good rookie season.
Yes,
if I'm not mistaken, I think he made one of the all-rookie teams.
I think he was first-team all-rookie. I think he might have been first-team all-rookie. Anyway, continue.
He was a guy on my radar. Yeah. So going on, the second pick, I think, is the most interesting pick in the draft because I feel like that's kind of a consensus. I feel like he's kind of regarded as the best. Typically, Evan Mobley, in my opinion, is the second best player in this draft. But now if you look at the Houston Rockets, I mean, they do have Christian Wood, who was legitimately very good in this year, or I should say for them this year. He got hurt, but even when he came back, he went right back to being good for them, like a 20-10 guy consistently every night. Now, theoretically, you could play him at power forward and kind of have like a really big kind of front court, I would say the Pelicans did way back in the day with Anthony Davis and DeMarcus Cousins. At least that was the idea. And that team, by the way, was still like top 10 in the league in pace. They were truly special. I feel like that doesn't get enough attention, that little short span before those injuries started happening. That could have been a really dangerous team with the confidence they had at the time. So maybe they decide to do that. I don't think the NBA is a model where this is what wins you basketball games and that everyone thought, oh, the Golden State Warriors, this is the way you play basketball. You got to be a perimeter-oriented team, and if you're not going to win championships. Well, clearly the Phoenix Suns have changed, that perspective at least. So I don't know if people are then going to say, oh, it's all about going in the paint, and they will go big with Evan Mobley. But I think building a team that makes sense around your talent is probably the way that you win championships. So they may have to go, maybe they trade back, maybe they go the Suggs route to go for a guard. I like Tate. I think he also maybe made an all-rookie team, Jayshawn Tate. Past that, I'll have to do a lot of scouting. I mean, one of the bigger interesting stories about the draft in the short term here is the results of playing in the G League. That was the big question, right? There were two guys. I can't think of Kamunga, I think is one of them. And Jalen Green, they both went to the G League to make some money. I think they made like $500,000 each. And here's the thing, right? They're still in the top 5 or 6, 7, let's say, somewhere around that range, probably top 5. So you could say it was successful. But if you look at the year list of how the draft was going to shake out, Jalen Green was first overall, peers with Cade Cunningham, and now he's nowhere near that conversation. So it's pretty interesting to see how guys will take that. Maybe they'll see it as successful, or maybe they'll think of the G League as a more safe route to take versus maybe more risky in college when you can really hurt your draft stock. That's a conversation we'll have to wait and see.
Spence, the Detroit Pistons, 3 first-round draft picks last year. It's Killian Hayes, 7th overall, Isaiah Stewart, 16th, and Sadiq Bey, as you mentioned, 19th. And they'll have the first overall pick in this upcoming draft. Some more teams in the top 10. The Orlando Magic, I believe, will be 5th. Oklahoma City, Golden State, which gets the pick from Minnesota in the D'Angelo Russell trade. They will be picking 7th and 14th. Orlando, which also gets Chicago's selection in the Vucevic trade. Sacramento and New Orleans, also in the top 10. Spence, I saw Rick Kamla tweet out from NBA, formerly NBA TV, but SiriusXM NBA radio. If you're Golden State, do you try to package the 7th, the 14th pick, and James Wiseman to Washington for Bradley Beal? Briefly, what are your thoughts on that tweet by Rick Kamla? Should Golden State be active in trying to package their picks and add somebody to the mix to put them in position to maybe compete in the West for one of the top spots next season?
Yeah, Rick Kamla. So the one beef I have with him, by the way, is he's just too positive. I don't know if you also hear that from him. He never has anything bad to say about anybody, and you could say that's a great trait, but after a while, it becomes sickening. It's like you have to dislike something, dude. But that's an interesting tweet. I don't know if I'd even accept that for Bradley Beal. I think you can probably get a lot more. I didn't really like what I saw out of James Wiseman. I wasn't a huge fan of his coming out of the draft. When you're trading Bradley Beal, you don't want potential. And considering that they're not even in the top 5 in those picks, you want someone who you know is going to be a starter for your team for a long time. Can James Wiseman be a starter? Sure. He will be. I don't expect him to have an all-star team, at least not in the next 5 years. He's got a long way to go. So you got to be really confident. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure there's another team that's going to offer them something really significant for that guy. Someone who a team doesn't necessarily want to part ways with, but they will if they feel like it'll lead them to a championship. I would be interested if I was Washington and Ben Simmons. Given all the criticism that they've had, I mean, I think one of the main issues with the process is that they never built a team around Ben Simmons. They built it around Joel Embiid, not the both of them. And that also just raises the question of, can you build a team around both of them? That was the question we've asked for the past 2 years, being that Ben Simmons certainly is not a perimeter-oriented player. I think we can say that with a little bit of confidence. Joel Embiid kind of expanded his game. But again, I think that is something that's more interesting than James Wiseman, because you've seen a lot from Ben Simmons and you like the defensive player of the year ability for him. And also, I think the Washington Wizards are very close to, expunging a lot of those contracts on the team. And if it's horrible for a couple of years because you have Ben Simmons and Westbrook on the same team, I mean, that matters so little to me, like from their perspective, or if I was the GM, it's not about, can we make the playoffs the next 2 years? Who cares? Because they're not going to get anywhere near a championship. Certainly, they were like one of the hottest teams going into the playoffs, and they couldn't do anything when they got there. So for the Warriors, if they can get that trade, of course, they'd be happy to. But again, I don't think Washington's going to be even slightly interested in taking a roller late in the lottery just to maybe get someone good to replace Bradley Beal.
Spence, what percentage would you rank or at least put the odds that the Sixers do move on from Ben Simmons in the offseason? Do you think that that's high probability for Elton Brand, Doc Rivers, and the Sixers that they will move on from Simmons, or do you think it's more 50-50?
Yeah, emotions are really high right now. So we've gotten a big look at both sides of it, where during the series, Doc Rivers comes out and says, this is our guy. You got to be crazy for thinking that I would ever bench Ben Simmons. And then after Game 7, when of course he doesn't play well again, I'm not sure he can be a starting point guard on a championship team. And now it comes out that we're going to work with him and we're going to make him a lot better. So I would say it's a little more favorited for them to keep him, because I think his trade value, quite frankly, tanked. So the only conversation I'd have is with guys who, before the season started, where it was already talking about it. Like, I think they were talking about trading James Harden for Ben Simmons at some point in the season. That doesn't feel like it's on the same table. Like if Brooklyn, or I should say if the 76ers approach Brooklyn now and kind of gave them that same trade, or James Harden, they say, absolutely no way, you get away from us. So they're going to have to see what kind of value they get. It's not off the table. They make it seem like, oh, no, we're going to fix this in the offseason. We're going to move forward. Someone gives them the right call, he's gone in a second. Mid-practice, if they have to, I guarantee it.
Spence, I'm going to say this right now and mark it down, Spence, 6/22/2021. Please remember it, because I've been quite great with some of my prognostications in the NBA. If the Golden State Warriors are healthy, and what I mean by healthy is Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, and Steph Curry play the majority of the season and they're healthy come playoff time, I don't know what other moves the Warriors will make. I think Ben Simmons would be an interesting fit if they were able in some capacity to get him to Golden State in a trade. But if Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, and Draymond Green are healthy, this Warriors team is going to be in the mix to represent the West in the Western Conference Finals again, because they do with what these teams that are excelling in the playoffs do. They shoot the ball exceptionally well. They'll be solid from the free throw line, and hopefully they'll be healthy. So I expect a really big year from the Warriors this upcoming year. They're going to be fresh, rested from not going to the playoffs, and I'm really excited to see. We still have tons of great basketball ahead of us in this season, but the Warriors next season are going to be a team, and I don't think their odds are going to be astronomical if they're healthy. I still see Vegas being high on them at under 25-1, but I'm really excited to see how next year transpires, because we've seen with the Hawks and the Suns in particular, if you can shoot the basketball and you can shoot well from the free throw line, you're going to put yourself in a position to be in the discussion for a conference finals. And, if Brooklyn's healthy, they'll have something to say in the East as well. If you're just joining us, the Rest Stop, 9 to 10 o'clock Pacific time, Tuesday and Thursday. I'm Brad Restituto, Spencer Ostrovsky with me. Huge news tonight, of course, in the NBA playoffs. The Phoenix Suns take a 2-0 series lead in the Western Conference Finals over the LA Clippers with 0.9 seconds left on the clock. An inbounds pass from behind their basket. Jay Crowder throws a perfect pass directly to the basket off a Devin Booker back screen. Ayton was able to get some space. DeAndre Ayton catch the lob, dunked the basketball with 0.7 seconds left, only took 0.2 off the clock, and it secured the improbable victory for the Phoenix Suns, and they'll go back to Staples Center more than likely with Chris Paul back in the lineup with a 2-0 series lead. A fantastic finish tonight in the NBA. Also, locally here in Vegas, at the T-Mobile Arena, the Vegas Golden Knights were tied at 2 games apiece in the Western Conference Finals series. They fell tonight. The road team, the Canadiens, came in to the T-Mobile Arena and they dominated the Vegas Golden Knights, and they won 4-1. And they will go back to Montreal with an opportunity to close out the Knights in Game 6 and represent the West in the Stanley Cup Finals with a victory. The Knights are in dire straits to get 2 games in a row here. So it's going to be very important for the Vegas Golden Knights. Spence, let's switch over to the NFL. Huge news yesterday. Some would say groundbreaking historic news as Karl Nassib, defensive lineman for the Las Vegas Raiders, in an Instagram post comes out and announced that he's gay. And this is not unprecedented in professional sports, but in the NFL, an active on the roster player coming out as gay is pretty big news. It's groundbreaking news. And in the day and time that we're in, Spence, with social media and topics socially, politically being so heightened, this is going to be an interesting story to follow between now and the regular season. How many teammates, players, personnel, professional athletes across the landscape will be asked about this? How will these questions be answered down the road? What doors will this open politically? There's a lot of questions that are not to be answered yet that we'll see how much corporations and how much sponsorship gets pushed in a different direction for Karl Nassib to be the face of. And Spence, you're a diehard Raiders fan. Is Karl Nassib even in a position to make this 52-man roster? I mean, the Raiders have upgraded this defense. They have a new defensive coordinator in Gus Bradley. Karl Nassib did not have his best year statistically last year. So first talk about the news itself. And then as you talk about the impact of that news coming out, Karl Nassib's chances of even making this roster and being a player that deserves from a playing standpoint to be on this roster.
Yeah, so super happy for the guy. I mean, I can't imagine it would be like to live your life as a lie. It's like, must be, I'm sure he lived his life, but I imagine that digs at you for a very long time. So again, kudos to him. When I was a kid, I had a gay babysitter. Like, it was like so early on in my life, how natural and just, it's like you love who you love. And it never really, it just wasn't a thing for me. Like, I didn't find out until I was much older that people had such an issue with it. So when I see things like that, it does make me really happy. And look, I mean, here's the reality situation when it comes to like his playing. He didn't have great stats last year, but again, the Raiders are, in my opinion, the least talented defense in the entire NFL. So when you look at his stats from an individual basis, like if you were just like, binocular view it and just look at him, you're like, wow, it's not really great. 3.5 sacks. Those 3.5 sacks were third on the team. He was third on the team in tackles for a loss at 17. So he definitely will make the roster because there's just physically nobody else on the team. And I mean, he's the first active player and he'll be the first player to, actually play in a game. Again, I do hope that one day these kinds of stories aren't news and that it's just either you are or you aren't, or hopefully, I mean, even to like a further horizon where it just doesn't matter. Like, I don't know. It's unfortunate that the how much, I guess, disparity, or that's not the right word. I like just the general animosity around the LGBTQ community. It's just ridiculous to me. Even if people disagree with it, it has nothing to do, with that. It's like people are just going to live their life, and it's not going to affect you at all. Like, you can have your own personal beliefs, but as long as people like him can be happy and they can be happy out in the open about it, that's all that's important to me.
Yeah, Spence, I'm really curious because I think this could go one of two ways. I think, like a lot of people are saying initially, I think this. A lot of people think this shouldn't be as big of a story. This should just be something in 2021 that if somebody wants to live their life, it's really not that newsworthy at this point. But I think how the media and how as a whole it's going to be covered and how much of a potential distraction by so many questions discussing it or not will determine where we're at as far as it being as newsworthy as it is. Is this something that 3-4 months from now, Raiders personnel, players will still be answering questions on? Is this something Karl Nassib is going to be pushed to be a spokesman for from corporations and companies? As we know, we are in Pride Month, and this is something on a social landscape, not only LGBTQ, but politically and the cancel culture. There's so much heightened protection on and sensitivity around so many vast, diverse subjects that it's going to be interesting to see how this is going to be navigated over the next 6 months, Spence. Is this something that will kind of be not a newsworthy story in 4 months? And if it is, it'll kind of be an indication of where we're at moving forward as far as just being something that's talked about still in the locker room, even though it is groundbreaking and historic. Now, of course, he's not the first NFL player to come out as gay. Former Viking in the 90s, Ezra Tuaolo, defensive tackle, is a gay man who's come out after his playing career. We know Michael Sam, during the draft process, come out as gay, as he was a SEC Player of the Year, did not play a regular season game in an NFL uniform. But basketball players, John Amici, one of the Collins twins. So this is not completely unprecedented. It just is for the NFL and an active player. And the NFL is a different beast when you're talking about such a heightened masculinity and violent sport.
Yeah, and no, you bring up a really great point, and a point I don't think anyone's really talking about. And you have to be, like, I guess, careful when you talk about this. But look, the day after it announced, he becomes the best-selling jersey for yesterday and today, right? So, I mean, which is good for him, right? He gets a little bit of that money. I'm not saying that's bad. Of course, he didn't come out just to sell jerseys, but
sure,
media companies will look at that and say, wow, this is a marketable guy. The thing that you worry about, because I'll give an example before I go further into like what I think could happen, right? When Kobe died, they dragged his name through the gutters immediately. I said it in the podcast the day after it happened. My biggest worry is that he'll just become a big marketing thing. They started using him for political commercials, Kobe Bryant. They put his name immediately on the cover of 2K. I mean, they have the rights to these things. And will the NFL then come out with an LGBTQ like line of clothing and stuff? Like,
yes, Spence, this is something that I've thought about. This is a real big possibility. We know that the NFL has a month where they are for the cause, and I could certainly see this. Spence, this opens up a lot of doors, and I know we're very early in the process, but we're now possibly talking. If you look, we live in a capitalistic society, Spence. It doesn't matter what corporation, who they're funded by. If they see an opportunity to make money, they will exploit that. And if that means maybe now having youth football camps strictly for LGBTQ, I mean, Karl Nassib, and by no means do I think he intended for this at all, but this is the nature of business and corporations. They see an opportunity to make money. Their eyes are lighting up with possibilities, especially as you mentioned, now his jersey being sold. So that's where I think this distraction could come in, not because Nassib wanted the attention to himself, but corporations, as ruthless as they are in this society, especially coming back from the COVID pandemic, looking to make money, seeing a grand opportunity for the LGBTQ community to benefit off this, not only socially, but monetarily.
Yeah, that's been one of the bigger criticisms I think that I've seen from the LGBTQ community on Twitter, is that all these companies change their logos to, the pride flag, like they kind of implement that in the way that they look. And the day after it's done, boom, they're gone. And then, when the month starts up again, then it's all about marketing for it. I don't know. It's kind of crummy. I mean, at the end of the day, they are businesses. So how many
Spence froze up there, so hopefully we'll have him back in a second. But not trying to take away from the historic moment, but just talking about the real possibility of this being turned into something more than just a human being living his truth. And that's the reality of this world we live in. This is the United States of America, which we know has been politically and socially heightened over this last 18 months to 4 years. And it's going to be interesting to see how this story turns, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe this is just us playing devil's advocate and seeing what could happen and not what will happen. But it's going to be interesting to see how this continues to move forward over the next few months. It can go either way, Spence, and we'll be able to cover that as it continues to evolve or doesn't. So it's going to be interesting to see what transpires, but certainly commending Karl Nassib for the courage and guts to do this. He said this is something that he's thought about for over 15 years. So to be able to have the guts to do this is not only remarkable, but some would say unthinkable, the courage that it takes to do this. And of course, he's going to be donating $100,000 to the Trevor Foundation. He talked about the statistics of suicide of young people that maybe are part of the LGBT community or not feeling comfortable coming out and living their truth in this reality of this world. So definitely kudos to him and to him really being the flag bearer for active players. So we'll definitely continue to monitor how this story evolves over the future, because it is historic and groundbreaking. Spence, keeping it in the NFL as we're wrapping up tonight's show, to me, a commendable story now into a story which we don't have exactly all of the details, but regardless, just the information we do have is kind of mind-blowing in itself in a negative way. Frank Clark, two-time Pro Bowler, Super Bowl champion, an important player on this Kansas City defense, having an Uzi in his car, this is absolutely incredible. Like, I mean, I don't know where to start with this, but what the hell are you doing? We've talked about guys with so much to lose, making so many questionable decisions. This is definitely up there on that list. 28 years old, in the prime of his career, now possibly facing felony gun possession charges. This could really, if it goes sideways, impact his career, certainly his reputation. And from what I've heard, this is not the first incident this guy has had with weapons. We're talking about an Uzi, Spence. I mean, what do you know about this weapon? I know it's something that the average person doesn't typically carry around at all. It's like, man, I mean, I am just blown away, quite frankly, of the stupidity of any human being. And as a civilian in this society, carrying this kind of weapon around, especially a professional athlete, I'm sorry. I don't know exactly the details, but what I do know, I'm sorry to insult Frank Clark, but this is an absolutely idiotic, moronic decision that's unacceptable. And getting just a little bit of the details, I think this guy's job's on the line. I don't care how good he is. I think the front office and Andy Reid and the coaching staff, this guy could really seriously have his job in jeopardy as a player with the Kansas City Chiefs.
Well, we've talked about this the entire offseason. Zaven Collin also going over 70 miles per hour in a 35 zone just, I think, yesterday, I think it came out the same day as this. Melvin Gordon, we watched that video of him literally being drunk and getting pulled over with no consequences for his actions. That would be jail time for any other human being. And then Josh Jacobs admits that he was drinking, driven to a hospital way far away from where he was, and not even given a breathalyzer test, even though he admitted to drinking. No consequences again. As long, I said this before, I'll say it again, as long as there's no consequences for your actions, they will continue to do this and they will think they're unstoppable. This guy's driving around in a Lamborghini, a car that's worth more value than most of us make in a year. So look, they don't care. Like, that's the whole thing. Like, when you do something like this and you're driving around in a Lamborghini, with weapons like this in your backseat, you legitimately don't care about everybody else around you. It's you're living in la la land, and nobody, for whatever reason, these owners probably have a lot of power. I mean, I can't say for sure, but clearly, if you look at the punishment to crime, like for all these NFL players going back in history, I can't imagine the rates for those players are the same as what you and me would get. If I was found with a Uzi in the back of my seat, I'd be in prison. Like I would legitimately be in prison. So the fact that he's already out, like he's fine, like he's just gonna have to go to court at some point, is a true testament to the reality of the situation that we find ourselves in.
Spence, there's a lot of guys that have been involved in off the field incidents this season, and we'll see when it comes closer to training camp and preseason time. The NFL, will they be levying down suspensions, likes of Melvin Gordon? You mentioned Jeff Gladney of the Vikings had a domestic issue, this Frank Clark issue, and countless others. As there's always stories in the offseason in the NFL, we'll see what punishments will be levied down from the NFL coming up to that. That'll do it for tonight's show. The rest up, we will be back Thursday, 9 o'clock. Some more playoff NBA action, NHL action, and of course, whatever breaks down in the news between now and then. So for Spencer Ostrowski, I'm Brad Restituto. You guys have a great night. We'll see you back the rest stop on Thursday.